Right, so we sort of the close Indian of the Kav, Animshach, Me'a'er Seif Achre the Tzimtzum, was inionary to bring about the difference between Maila and Mata. And we saw that the Indian for Maila Mata is where there's more Gilui of the original Ein Seif before the Tzimtzum, and that's called Maila, and where there's less Gilui Ein Seif, and that's called Mata. And we saw that the same is not only in the Oilamis, that the Oilam Ha'elyoin is more Gilei Ein Seif, because it's Makabel from the Madrega the Kav, which is closer to the original Ein Seif, and the Oilam which is called Lamata, is where there's already been a further Yerida in the Kav and less Gilei of the Ein Seif. And then we saw not only like that in the Oilamis, but also in each Sphira or Sphira Shebachol Oilam, also there's in them the union of Maila or Mata. We find, for example, the Moichin are considered the Maila Miamidas in their Etzem Madrege, not just that they have a certain control over the Midas, but they are Mishumze, because of that they're in the Madrege. Lamaila Miamidas, and in the Midas Gufa, you have Etzem Hamidas, and then you have what's called the Anfe Hamidas, Neita Fahi. So those are also Madregas or Inyonim of Maila Umata in the Betuich Kol Olam or Olam, in the spheres themselves, from one sphere to the Adya. And then in each sphere Gufa, there's also what's going on in Olam HaAtzilus, the spheres Akludim Zemizeh. That's what we saw when we get to the union of the Amshocha of the Kav, and we brought down the famous lesson in the Moreh Shiorim from the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital, that he schema das Hamatzil, that it should only be one Kav, which is Nimshach from the Ein Seif, of another union from Ribui Kavim from the Makif meaning the Yoshel Nea Tzimtzum, to each and every sphere. In other words, that you would have a Kav individual to each sphere. Instead of having a Kav a Kav Achid, Be'emta Kilo, you would have a Ribui Kavim Nimshachim from the Aramachim to each sphere. So then we saw that there would be a lack in this whole concept of Maila or Mata, that then all the spheres would be equal by Madrigosim. Ela Shahoyu Oz Madrigas Matzias. Like a Moshe Meya Aleim B'chinas Ein Seif Atzmei Shaloya Adakav. He said the only union would be that since the Yoel was Nimshach through the union from Kav, then each of them would be in a even of Matzias. It wouldn't be Kolov or Botul in the Ein Seif like it was Koidem in Atzimtzum. But since the Kavim would be Shovim in Yoneim, then each of the Oilamas and each of the Mekablim and the Kav would be Shovim. The only mile we'd have is that they were Yoitzim a Beetle b'Matzias to a union of Matzias. And that's not what the Das HaMa'atzil wanted. Therefore, his schema Das HaMa'atzil, the Eibishter's Kaviochel intention, did not agree with that, or did not see that to be the case. He saw that there had to be one Kav, which would go from level to level, but derech Yerida. And we'll see later on, as we go along here, that the type of Yerida and the type of descent in that Kav Echod is called in the Lashon of Chassidus Shtaushales. In other words, at each level it's got a certain connection with the previous level, but each one derives downwards in a state of further descent from the intensity that was at the beginning of the whole process. And that's what leads essentially to the concept of Maila or Mata. But Ilu, they were all Makablim in two Eifanim. Either they were Makabel each sphere with its own Kav, so then they would all be Shovim b'Madrigos albeit not botel, they would be a Matthias. Or another possibility that the Rebbe mentions here is that they could be, that all of them would be just makabel from the Erein Seif mamish. That there could be a Inin Shel Matthias, that they went out from their bittul in the Erein Seif, but then they were just makabel from him directly, Shalal they kav at all. Well, then they would be completely betelim b'matziuson. In other words, here we see an interesting chiddush. So we'll read the language inside, and then we'll see more about it. So he says, "The oz hoyu gamkein shovim b'madrigoson, ela shehoyu oz b'prinas matzias. And not how it would be word that meya aleim b'prinas erein seif atzmoi shalea da kav klal. Just let us imagine that the Erein Seif were to be mayor upon them, not alidei any kav, not through any kav. No, there would be just a giver of the Erein Seif on these oilamers without a kav. So then we'll ask ourselves the question: how did they get there? If there was no kav, then how did the oilamers and the madrigas and the spheres, b'chol oilam, how did they get there? So we have to say that the Eibishter, in his omnipotence, he could produce, and that's what we're going to see. That's in effect what he's done with the whole inner of the world as we have it, and all the elements that we have them. That the Eibishter could have given forth from the state of complete bittul and in 12 and had involvement in the Erein Seif. He could have given out these elements into a form of gilui, but without the inyan of the kav, which would mean that the Erein Seif out is prior to the tzimtzum would just be mayor on them, like it is in its own right prior to the tzimtzum. So what would mean is that they would have come out. The tzimtzum would have been poil, that they've come out into some sort of a gilui from their state of involvement inside the Ein Seif. But they wouldn't become a Matthias, they would be still betelim, even though they've come out. So that asks yourself the interesting question: and what does it mean that they came out? I mean, if the Erein Seif is Meir Alev and that is betelim boy, then what's the difference when they came out or whether they didn't come out? I mean, what then would be the pool of the tzimtzum? So here we meet up with the interesting concept that Hanami, the tzimtzum and the omnipotent power of Hashem is sufficient and enough to make them, as it were, appear. But since they would be still under the influence of the Erein Seif Bali Shinui in that regard, they would still be bottled, even though they had moved, as it were, from their state of Iskala. So then you would have your cake and eat it too. Because on the one hand you would say that they have come out from the Erein Seif, and yet on the other hand you say that they haven't. And that's why I use the word omnipotence. Lefi there, that's like two opposites in one inyan. It's like two contradicting opposites in one noseh, in one theme, in one inyan. So the Eibishter, mitzad dekol Yahweh, he can do that. He can have them come out, and yet he can have them still botel. But the Das HaMatzil didn't want that either, because that's not what we want. It doesn't achieve what we really want. But what we're going to say is that that's really what we've done. That's really what the situation is. It's just that we don't notice that. All right. So anyway, here's where we move now into the tricky passage. And he says that if they were and it wouldn't be like they would be a Matthias, which would not be the case if the Erein Seif hadn't been mayor upon them in himself, not through a kav at all. The Oz Lobacha Hoyu Shovim Madrigoson, apart from the fact that they would all be equal, Hoyu Betelim B'Matthias Lagamre. They would be botil in their very Matthias, meaning that their Matthias would not be felt or noticeable at all. They would be just absorbed in the Ein Seif like it were before the Tzimtzum. they would be betelim b'metzias lagamri shelo hoyu oilam is bechinas metzias dova ma. What do you need the tzimtzum for, or what not? What do you need the tzimtzum for? What did the tzimtzum help? What did it help? I mean, that is like they were before anyway. Oz v'hoyo oz toyelas hatzimtzum, the point or the usage, what you might call the usefulness of the tzimtzum, rak bozeh shehoyo hamshoches v'izgalas ha'olamot. It would only be in that prat that there could be this union of the derivation and the gilu of the Elamos. The tchila hoyu klulim, they were completely interwoven in the Ein Seif, shelifnei ha'tzimtzum, v'al yedei ha'tzimtzum hoyu b'chinas hamshocha v'izgalas. After the tzimtzum, they came into a state of derivation and revealing of themselves forth. Aval b'etzem metziuson hoyu k'moisha hoyu lifnei ha'tzimtzum mamit. Over in their etymologies, they would be just like they were before the tzimtzum. So here we meet up with a very fascinating concept that the tzimtzum, as well known, the famous doctrine of the Alter Rebbe, and this was amongst the things that the Alter Rebbe had Mesiras Nefesh for. It's not stam that he held this way, but he met up with a lot of doctrinal isnagdas, not just isnagdas, much lower level that he met up with, also from the Talmidei HaGror and others, when he said that the tzimtzum is not kipshutei. The tzimtzum is not in a simple sense. In other words, that the tzimtzum doesn't really happen. So if it doesn't really happen, then what do you mean? What do you talk about? Why do you talk about it, for example? So it does happen, but it doesn't. So how do you have both? It doesn't happen legabi Hashem. As far as he's concerned, there's no tzimtzum. The whole tzimtzum is only for the sake of the receivers, as it were, for the downward process of the light. We should be able to say something's happening, even though legabi him it's not happening, but legabi the makablim, it's here happening. What we would say is that these oilamas were all klulim and betelim mamish inside the Ein Seif. What happened was the tzimtzum made them, like, as far as we're concerned, go out. They moved out of that state. But what Hashem did was, it's like how he could shooting an arrow and then catching up with it, like Rashi says. Excuse me. In Pasha Hazinu, Rashi says, over there, in Pasik, we said that Shalak Kaborach Chitui or something, he sent out his arrow like a lightning flash or something. And Rashi brings down over there that the Eibusha sends arrows not like human beings send them. The human beings send arrows, and once his arrow's gone, he can't catch it. He can't do anything about the arrow. Hashem sends the arrows, and then he catches them before they reach their destination. I mean, the same thing here. The Eibusha makes the tzimtzum, but he just runs around and catches it. It doesn't really happen like Abihim. It's only happening, as it were, in order to create an impression agabi those who are going to be on the receiving end. The tzimtzum only occurs downwardly, or not, in a full way, or not respectively, gabi Hashem. And that was a big doctor when Alter Rebbe said that. He blew all the understandings of many of the great scholars and other things in those days, and some of the great Talmidim that weren't really shy to the whole thing from Misnagdim and so on. But Talmidim of the Arizal, or Talmidim of the Arizal, they differed with that idea, and they said, no, the tzimtzum actually happened. The tzimtzum was kipshutei. And the Alter Rebbe went really sharp against that, and it got him into trouble. It was one of the things that led to difficulties, plus many other doctrines and things that the Alter Rebbe said, that he later faced big trouble from having said these, or having written and claimed these and taught these things. So this happens to be one of them. So the tzimtzum is like pshutei. So what happened is that the tzimtzum would cause, if this were to be the case, it would cause the elements to come out in a way of revelation, but only legabi the makablim, as far as Hashem's concerned. nothing really happened. Yeah, therefore, they can stay within the Ein Sof. They only moved outside the Ein Sof as far as we're concerned, but not as far as him. Yeah, therefore, they're still inside the Ein Sof. Yeah, therefore, they're still bottle b'tachus to bottle b'tachus habitl, because he didn't change that aspect of it. He didn't change the aspect that the Ein Sof is still meir like it was. All he did was toyelas of the tzimtzum. He made them look as if they'd gone outside him. But of course, ultimately, it doesn't go that way, because ultimately the kav causes that even the Ein Sof himself undergoes changes, the gavi de makablim, not just that they move outside kavi, but even in the earth itself, there's all these tremendous changes and tzimtzumim on the way down. Says the Alter Rebbe, if we'd have done it that way, then the toyelas of the tzimtzum would have been the isgalus of the eilamas. But since it hadn't really done anything more than that, then everything would have been begolui, even the gabi de makablim. They themselves would have been b'tachas habitl b'mechi. Amelia says the Rebbe Raksha b'bezer shahoyo am shokav zikalas oim tchiloyu klulim bein shevnei atzim. V'ali the atzim tum hoyo b'chinas am shokav zikalas avol b'etchem matziuson hoyo k'moi shahoyu lifnei atzim tum. Mamish, they wouldn't become a ini for Matziyah. Mashen Cain, had the kav gone to everyone in its own right, then they all would have been in the form of Matziyah, because the kav indicates the Indian of Tzimtzum even in the Mamish. And that's what we would have been faced had we done it that way. So the Rebbe says the truth of the matter is that that's the way it is now. Or the way it would have been then, as it were, that's the way it is now. That when we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, when we say that the Eibush is one and that everything is b'chinas achdus, and that's what we mean. That everything is mamish bottled to the Eibush, just like as if the Ein Sof was meir b'golui, and everything is bottled in that oil, and that's what we mean by Hashem Echad. However, why don't we say Hashem Yachid? We should say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Yochid. The Eibush is the one and only. Now, had we said that, then that would mean that it never began at all, that nothing ever happened at all, that everything is just batil v'kol in him as if there's nothing, and nothing ever began. And that's not right. According to Torah, the worlds did come about. According to Torah, they did come about. So how can you have that they came about? Once again, you have a cake and you eat it. How can you have that they came about, but they absolutely bottled yes? And then you say that they came about, but only as far as they're concerned. Only as far as Hashem, they didn't really come about, and He is mayor upon them, just like as if nothing happened. And them, they came about, and they are in a very strong type of Mashiach. But as far as He's concerned, they never came a being. But the difference is that they did come about. Even Lagavi Hashem. And that's what we're going to see now as the quetch. They did come about, but they didn't.
Does the kav have a panemius to it that is the same?
Yeah, the kav does have a panemius.
It's not affected by
but that's not affected by the tzimtzum either, but we're not talking about the panemius right now. We'll get to that later.
The Torah and the mitzvahs, are they mekablim
well, the Torah and the mitzvahs, no, we had in the previous Maimon. The Torah and mitzvahs, they represent the Ratzon HaAtzmi, and we said that the Ratzon HaAtzmi is the Gamei L'mayla from all the Medidas of the Olam. That's got nothing to do with the Ratzon in the Hisavas of the Olam. It's L'mayla from the Ratzon, the Hisavas of Olam. You follow? That's what we said. Here we're talking about the Ratzon for the Hisavas of Olam. Here we're talking about the worlds alike. Torah and mitzvahs are higher than the worlds. And Torah and mitzvahs, that's another Ein altogether. That's what we said. That's even the Eibush's will. It's not really his will for anything. It's just him himself. When you do a mitzvah, you just bring down the Gilui of the Eibush beyond all of this. All right. So that's what he now goes on to say. Okemoi shehu be'amitius gam achshav. Like it is truthfully and be'emes also now. In other words, it really there's no worlds. We're all just bottled in the Ein Sof Mammon. Kiyadua be'inyan havaya echad. In the inyan van Hashem echad. Now notice Hashem echad, and not Hashem Yachid. Because Yachid means he's the only one. Echad means that something did come about according to Torah, but it didn't. It's all bottled in him. But as far as the Torah is concerned, it does have a certain Matthias, as far as the Torah is concerned. So it's not Hashem's Matthias, but it is a Matthias. And therefore it's written Hashem Echad, and it's well known that the Aleph is the Aluf Shel Olam, that indicates Hashem himself, and the Dalet and the Ches are the four directions, and the Ches is the Oretz, and the Shiva Rakiyim, the seven is the seven heavens, and the Oretz and the four directions, and the whole thing. All of them are B'teilim to the Aleph. They're all Klulim or B'teilim in the Aleph, meaning that there are all these things, but they're B'teilim and Muvutolim to the Aleph. You know what the Aleph is? You know the Eivshter, how he's one and only. Alufay Shel Olam. That implies that somehow or another, even Lagabi the Alufay Shel Olam, they're there, but they're not. They're B'teilim Lagamri Elam. So how can that be? He says, Hashem Echad, Shezehu, how can you have the Hashem Echad? Lefi Shemeya Alehem or Ein Seif Begilui. The truth is that the Eibishter is Meya over all the worlds, Begilui. Ki Legabi Ein Seif, Ein HaTzimtzum Ma'alimu Mashtik, like we just said. The Tzimtzum doesn't really happen Legabi here. The Tzimtzum is only to the Makablim. It doesn't happen as far as Hashem's concerned. As far as he's concerned, he's mayor after the like he is kodemus as far as he's concerned. All these little things that you call the elamus are all still swallowed inside the air, ain't safe mamish, because all the tzimtzum only happens like Gabi them, but it doesn't happen like Gabi Hashem. Ula zoish hariheim betelim b'machias legamri. They have no Matthias whatsoever. They're all bottled inside his unbelievable, unlimited light, and therefore, v'hariheim miyuchadim legamri. Now the word miyuchadim is very important, because miyuchad means, how do you call it? They're like past participial. You know, they are united in miyuchad. Not they're yochid, but they're miyuchad. They're united into something. It's happening to them, meaning that they still have some sort of a Matthias, but they're all united into the oneness of Hashem. Yeah, miyuchad. Now we'll soon see why we say that. He said, Harehem miyuchadim legamrei, ve'im kein mahu inyan ha'ishavet. Ask yourself the shaila, what is the inyan of the creation? What does it mean that the worlds came about? If they're completely miyuchad inside the Ein Seif, then what does it mean that they came about? So you might say, Einochanami, they didn't really come about. Einochanami. They didn't really come about. Maybe. Yeah. But there is. That's what we're going to see. So he says, he says, Mahu inyan ha'ishavet, shariksiv, because behold, it is written, Bereshis bara Elokim. So it comes out that the Torah, which is the emes, the Torah says that the Eibush himself created. Bara means that something came about. Bara means yesh, miyayin. That's well known, the Ramban, the famous Ramban, that ain't lana mila b'loshen kodesh yoter le'inin yesh miyayin miloshen bara. Imam or boirei. I come to it that the Torah says that the Eibusha allows it to be written about him that he created the world. And I would say something must have happened. You can't possibly say that the Torah is just talking about something that never really happened. Because then it would come out that the Torah is not really saying the truth. It's not really saying what actually happened. But it says Bereshit bara Eloi Elokim. So here we find the most amazing Indian now, that on the one hand, as far as the Eibush is concerned, nothing really happened. It's all bottle in him, because the symptom didn't really happen, nothing really happened. You know, Rebbe said, the Rebbe, how come he created, or what does it mean in the Torah, Bereshit bara Elokim? He also says that there was a creation. What is that? How does it happen? Is that correct? If all these things don't really happen, as far as he's concerned, so how come he created the way? He didn't let anything happen. You say that it happened like Gabiyas, you know, what are we to blame on? It happened like Gabiyas, but it didn't really happen. But if it's written that the Eibush created it did happen. So that's what he says now. And here's we see the most amazing idea. He says, Hine inyanai Shabbos hu rak shenim shechu v'nizgalu, that they, rak shenim shechu v'nizgalu, that they were derived and they appeared. The betchila hoyu klulim. Then at the beginning they were completely interwoven and involved inside the Erein Tev. V'inyan abriyu shenim shechu v'nizgalu chutz le'asmus kaviyochel. Avohem betelim umeyuchadim legamre. It's an unbelievable quetch. That the Rebbe said, nothing really changes, but again to their truthful bittul. The truthful bittul by them is that they're betelim legamre inside the area and say, gam lifnei abriya, gam le'achar abriya. I had to Rebbe say, what does it mean, Bereshit bara Elokim? Something must have happened. He did bring them about. He made them. He created them. He did it. He created them. So therefore, said the Rebbe made a most unbelievable thing, that they moved out, as it were, chutz le'atzmos, because everything is only him, and everything is only included in him. And there's nothing apart. Ein oid milvade, and that's the truth. The truth is ein oid milvade. But the bria is that the Eibush made that in a certain percentage they are milvade. They moved outside him and they became like chutz le'atzmos. The Eibush did that not only legavi to nivroim, but to a certain extent he did that by be'emes, that kaviyochel, they moved away from him a bit. They moved outside. Yeah, the etzemini of them be klulim be'atzmusim mamish, and they became as well, but they didn't change be'emes lamita. Be'emes lamita, they're still, and therefore we see that there's a hinin in Loshen Kodesh when they go to the bria and all these things, emes, and then emes lamita. There's the truth, and then there's the truth of the truth. So the truth is that he did bring him about. He did make him move outside him, as it were. Well, the emes lamita means that nothing really changed. Shum davar lo kara. Shum davar lo kara. The Eibush made this most amazing nest. The whole bria is the most amazing nest, that he did a thing and its opposite in one Indian. He made them move outside him, as it were. There's now like another thing apart from him, and then the truth of the matter, there really isn't. Oh, but that's enough of a truth to be called truth. It's not emes lamita, but it is emes. Now, why do we say that? Lama omrim davar kaseh. Come to in the Rebbe Marash in the famous Maimon Mikomoicha in Tovreish Koftes, and the Rebbe Marash brings out the very amazing proof that this is the case. He said, "Bikavet, if we're going to say that everything just, even after the Bereshit bara, everything just remains completely klulim and betelim Eibush, and the context there's no real Machias." He said there's a famous Mishnah in Masechta Sanhedrin. It's an amazing pincer. He pulls out this Mishnah in Masechta Sanhedrin. What it says over there, that how do you call a sorcerer, a machashev, he's chayv misa. If he does emes the sorcery, then he's chayv misa. So he says, what about if he makes you look at a field, and he makes all the things in the field get up, all the things that are growing, they get up and they walk over and they plant themselves in another field. And you see this happen, you know. So If, says the Mishnah, that doesn't really happen, and only just happens in an illusion, it doesn't really happen, then he's potter. He's not, he's forbidden to do that. That's also al pitel al seis tavakas. If it's not mamish the emes eating from kishu, therefore he's not chayav misa. But what about if he actually does make him get up out of the ground and walk across and plant himself in another piece of ground? Then in the emes and matzias of the world, that's what actually happens. Then he's chayav misa. Okay, that's emes kishu. It's not just an illusion; it actually happened. So the Rebbe Mara says, what's the difference? If the world itself is an illusion, the whole thing never really happened. There wasn't enough community, one type in the illusion and another type. It's all an illusion anyway. What did it make a difference in an illusion between one illusion and another illusion? That didn't really happen either. It just happened a bit more inside the illusion than what the other one did. And he said, how can you make him chayav misa? And then he said, what's it a pshat? He's chayav misa. He's not really there anyway, so you're going to kill him. What did you really do? Who bemis, who lo matziyu, it's like if you killed or you shot or you burned or whatever you did a non-existing entity. And the people who did it to him also don't exist like that. What's it a pshat that he's chayav misa anyway? Well, it's an amazing thing, eh? So says the Rebbe Rosh Kuntais that al pi Torah something did happen. Bereshis boro Elokim mitzad the Eibush, something did happen. And so the whole thing is like two opposites in one point. That he did make it happen to a certain extent enough that it's considered even the gabi him outside his matziyah to make you cholila chayav misa or whatever, that it could be reward and punishment al pi Torah. Over the other side of it's concerned, emes lamita, it didn't really happen. In other words, as far as the emes matzias of the Eibishter, it never really happened. Over legabi a certain aspect of his matzias, you're allowed it to happen. And therefore, we have to say Hashem echad. We can't say Hashem yachid, because the way he did it was that he really did let something happen. But emes lamita, it didn't really. Even that's not really happening. But on a certain level, it is. And that's what the Rebbe said. What happens now is Hashem echad means that in Emerson everything is bottled and everything is bottled and cheese, and that's emes lamita. Yeah, Bereshis bor Elokim. Yeah, means that there is a little bit of, but there is a certain Matthias al pi Torah there. But like Hashem's Matthias, it's not emes hameh. It's not emes hameh. Matthias. And that's what the Rambam writes. That's the famous Rambam, right at the very beginning, the first Rambam, where he writes, Kol asher b'shamayim va'oretz, all the heavens and the earth and everything b'neihem, Kol asher b'neihem, lo nimtzau ela mi'amitas himotoi. They came about from his emes being. Their being comes from his emes being. So what do you mean their being comes from their emes being? From Hashem's emes being. What does he mean with that? In other words, that Hashem's being always remains emes like any other being. Oh, but that's called being as far as the Torah is concerned. I used to say being. Oh, like him, it's not a mitus himotoi. Oh, well, that's what's written here. That's what the Rebbe says here. Mitzad echad, it did come out enough to make it into a Matthias. Oh, the emes of Matthias is a snip, and therefore it's bottled by Matthias, like Gabi the Eibishter. Mitzad hizoyer in Seif Mamish, it is bottled by Matthias. Amamir said that that's what he means. Gam achsho bi'amitias. But nowadays, it's like what we were suggesting, this other possibility, that had the Ein Sof just been mayor upon them, then everything would be bottled. What would be the purpose of the Tzimtzum? The purpose of the Tzimtzum to make him come about be'ezishu oiven shel Matziyah. Amamir said, Hine na'isavas hu rak ma shenimshachu nizkaru debetchila yu klulim v'inen abriya hu shenimshachu v'nizkaru chutz liatzmus kaviyochel means as it were. It's not really the case, but it is. It's enough to be called bara. And therefore he says, Aval b'heim b'teilim when you chadim l'gamay over mitzad the Matthias l'gabi, he's the emes state of Matthias and the b'teilim l'gamay. mitzad the mitzvah for the air ain't safe, which doesn't really change. V'ayinu shabitul v'ayichud ba'olames hu k'mei ayichud ba'oirois the iu v'chayeu chad. But it's one on the famous statement of the Tikkun Izeh, what the Alter Rebbe's got a famous letter in Geras HaKodesh chapter 20, but he's got over there the famous statement, iu v'chayeu chad, iu v'gamoi chad. That the Tikkun Izeh says that the Eibishter, Ihu meaning he and his, literally his life forces are one, and he and his bones literally are one. So what it means is that Chayoy is referring to the Oireis, and the Garmoihi is referring to the Kalim. So he says that he and his Oireis are one, and he and his Kalim are one. So why don't you just say Iyu v'chayev v'gamoy chad? Why do you write Iyu v'chayev chad, Iyu v'gamoy chad? Because not to be compared the type of chad. But Golui, the Kalim are already a Matthias mamish. The Kalim are a Matthias which comes in the form, and it's meant to be a form of a Matthias. They're one thing with the Eibishter. They never really become separate. But they're separate to a certain extent. They're a little bit separate because they're, they become in a form of Matthias wanted by the Eibishter. And therefore we call them a separate unity. We call them Gamoy Hichad. Over the Oiros are miyuchadim b'bchinas gilui with the Eibishter. In other words, it's just like light and the sun are united in a revealed way. Yeah, because if you don't have the sun, then you don't have the light. Automatically, there's unity of the oil with its ma'or, with its source. There's an absolute unity. And that was that the Rebbe, these oilemes are really like the bitler of the oil, gabi its ma'or, of the oil, gabi the source of the oil, which indicates that there are two entities, of course, because you say there's the ma'or and the or. Just you said they have a tremendous unity, one with the other. So the Rebbe said the bitl of all the elements is like that they're only a supposedly form of Matthias, even though it is a real, because you say Ihu and Chayehu, so of course they are two like gradations of entity. The source of the light and the light are two, but it's a very, very high unity. It's a unity of absolute oneness, because the Oya has no Matthias cloud without the Moya. And for its whole meaning is only speakable if it's miyuchad, but with the Moya, mashing in bones or kalim, they can have a certain little Matthias outside the Moya. Just like we see the planets and other things, they receive from the sun, but they're not mamish connected with it. That's what he says, that the Indian of the Ulam is, even though they came about, and even though they're in a form of a type of Matthias, but it's still in a way that Oyer is miyuchad with Moya. In other words, Iyu v'chai chayeu. Kamoi kain hu b'yemes ba'elam is gam kain v'od yoser. The truth of the matter is it's even more than that. Mitzad Oyer ain't safe, shemeya aleim begilui. How can that be? B'yidiyosei is bara. Now what he writes here, b'yidiyosei, means how the Eibishter knows it. Or how we know it, it's not like that. And that's what the Alter Rebbe points out in Sha'ar Yichud V'Mun, in Perek Vav, Perek Zayin, that the Alter Rebbe's knowledge, that the Eibishter's knowledge of things is completely different than our knowledge, because his knowledge is in such a way that nothing ever went out from him, and it's all just him, and part of him anyway. So therefore he knows it just like he knows himself. But we only know things that we get to learn about them. We're not really the things, and we get to know things. So they become part of us only after they've been completely separate from it. By the Eibishter Lechatchila, they never really become separate. But they do, sufficiently for it to be called Ayin from Bereshis Bora. Of a Mitzad Yidiyosei, but that's what we call Emes Lamita, as I described it before, then everything is bottled by Matthias even more than the Yichud of the Eretz with the Moyer. And that's just like a moshel. But the truth of the matter is that the Oilemis and the Nivroim are Betelim in the Ein Seif, Ameya Aleihem, even more than that. And that's Mitzad, the way he looks at it, Mitzad Yidiyosei. The way we look at it, then it's another Indian altogether. We can only come to understand the bittul of the Elamis in a relative way. It's very hard for us the mamish come to appreciate the bitul of the illumis in the way the Eibush does. We can only picture and as it were, in some way, form what you might call a tziur in our minds of that type of bitul. Of a mamish, to live it is very, very, very difficult. A kimuva. Because if you did, you just wouldn't be like you are. You'd just be completely bottled in the Eibishter, and certain tzaddikim gedolim were maybe zeicher lekorov, let's say. In other words, that they saw things how they are no maila lamata. And we could say that's in of a neshama datzilus. Neshama datzilus, he kilo sees it the way it is really mitzad the Eibishter, not so much mitzad the way created beings see it.
That's moti v'lamoti, yeah?
Meh?
Moti v'lamoti, it's the same level?
Moti v'loi moti, no. Moti v'loi moti is a bit of a lower level.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's similar, yeah. It's similar. It's how the rotzen, that's only how the rotzen is still called in the Atzmas, but the rotzen is only when you've already been nimshach, iskalas almanat, to bring the whole thing about. Yeah. Avo kasher meir ha'er al idei akav lo ha'er in seif atzmei, but it goes for a kav k'moi shehu. I'm sorry, lo al idei kav lo al idei ha'er in seif atzmei k'moi shehu, not like the Eibush is in his own self. Harihu naseh b'chinas metzius. Then everything after the kav, and as the kav goes down, everything becomes a form of a entity which feels its own self. In other words, that the kav gives rise to this feeling on the part of the makablim that they are there, as it were. And that's the whole purpose of the tzimtzum as far as the makablim are concerned, because they're already after the tzimtzum. We are makablim after the tzimtzum. And therefore, in Lubavitch, if somebody was a bit of a yesh and a bit of held himself to be important, then they used to say he takes the tzimtzum kipshute. He thinks that the tzimtzum is the symbol. In other words, he's really become a matzir. Why? Because you feel the matzir. You feel, but you have to realize that it's not like that. The truth is, you feel the matzir, but the other says you're not. How come you feel the matzir? Because it's a cow. So the cow is to blame. That's what's written here. And if I have a kasher meya al idei akav, yeah, harihu naseh b'chinas matziyah. Avo, I see you guys don't have a seditious sense of humor here. Avo im hoyo ribi, or im hoyo ribi kavim. It was all sorts of different kavim. Or you shovim b'madrigos on. Wouldn't be this whole in of derivation downwards from higher to lower. And therefore you understand that his schema das hamatzil, that's what he writes in the Movei Shiorim over there, that the Eibishter's literally opinion, or his way of looking at it, agreed, yeah, that liya is nimshech ha'er derech kav echad, one kav. Shenimshech memadrega lema, that when you've got one kav, then it's shot to literally modify from one level to the other. Hainu me'olam ha'elyoin el ha'olam ha'tachtoin. In other words, you can talk about a higher world and a lower world. The Savas ha'olam ha'tachtoin hu mi ha'olam ha'elyoin. Now this is the question that we're going to sort of also play with some ideas. Once I play Kashrov, we're going to deal with some ideas that maybe not this way, and we're going to have to eventually come back to say that we oblige to say that it is really this way. And that is that the Kav functions in a way that he is in other words, that if not the Eilam HaElyon would give him and be mashpia to him, he wouldn't really come about. In other words, his emissary what you might call drawing of nurturement of the lower world is from the one above him. And therefore, to a certain extent, he's dependent in the one above him. So we must say then that he's gone down a little bit, because if he was just on the same level, then he's like the one above him anyway. But if he would have received directly from the Ein Sof, then he would also be bottled in a way that he would be even bigger than the Elam HaElyon Mimenu. Therefore, we have to say that what's happened is that each level gives rise to the other level. And that's what we call Ilav Olo. There's always an intimate interrelation between our Olo with his Ilah. And therefore that's what we call Ilav Olo. Are you familiar with the concept of Ilav or Olo? Well, you should be. We already had it on numerous occasions. You want to suggest that you never heard of Ilav Olo? Right. Now, you never heard the concept of Ilav Olo? I'm sure you have. So anyway, what is Ilav Olo? Ilav Olo is not cause and effect. You mustn't translate it cause and effect, because cause and effect are different than Ilav Olo. That's cause and effect is in Lashon Kodesh Siba u'Mesubav. The cause and the thing that comes out of the cause and effect. And that's a dover rochoik she'em b'zeh seder mesuyam. But even Ilav Olo means source point and derivative. There's a source, and then it derives out of that source, because the source point functions, and in its way of functioning, it gives rise to a derivation from itself. That's called Ilah Alul. In other words, the Ilah is the source point, and the Alul is the thing that derives out of that source point, Bekiru, not by way of distance. Yeah, on the contrary, it has a intimate connection, and it receives a direct ashpah of life force and panemius from the Ilah. So therefore they are connected one to the other, and they're like these little links which are linked together, and they're linked one inside the other all the way down. Now that's the normal description of Ilav Olo. There are other inyonim in Ilav Olo. There are other ways that Ilav Olo do reveal themselves, but that's in a slightly different way. Well, Beregazeh, it's not our concern. Well, you might just happen to meet up with it, so don't come shooting with couchias. How come you said Ilav Olo was like this? Ilav Olo could be some other way. So it could be, maybe. And that other way that it could possibly be, I mean, it's just of interest, that it can be discussed even if an Ilav Olo is when the Arikoim, when the Mezritcha Magid, when he took over the leadership of the whole Chassidic movement, after the famous year went past when the Baal Shem Tov's son led the movement, but it was clear that he wasn't able really to do so. He wasn't the man for the task. And then when they met together, all the Talmidim on a certain was the outside. It might have been immediately after the Shviz, immediately after the outside of the Baal Shem Tov. Could be, yeah. They all met together, and then he stood up and took off his coat that he had from the Baal Shem Tov, and he went over and put it on the Magid. You know the famous story. And he said that the whole Pamali Shel Maila, he said the whole congregation, host of Lamayim, all the angels and everything, they're all moving from my shoulder over to the Dov Bechni, called to Mag Bai's name. He said they're moving onto his shoulder. He took off the thing and he put it on the Magid. And so then the Magid, he said a Torah. He said, like the COVID, the fact that he received the leadership, he said a Maimon, like a short Maimon Chassidus, based on a posik in the vision of Yecheskel at the beginning of the famous vision of the chariot and everything of Yecheskel. And over there he's Mavaya, the Ilav Olo, differently than what we're talking about it. That's two different. I found him in the Gila of Ilav Olo. So you might just happen to come across that. And it should be to good health and with a lot of hatzlacha. But at the moment, we are dealing with this idea of all the closeness and the kesher from one level in the alul with the ilah, and literally to the point that we can say that his others derives from there. He comes about through that. And that was at the Rebbe. If that's the way they go down, then it follows that the whole Inyan is that the Tartoin is deriving its nurturement begolui from the one above. And there must be a whole seder here on the way it goes, because if he was just receiving exactly what the upper one received, then he's the upper one. If he's receiving in such a way that he's already become another level, then it must have gone down to a certain derivation from the ilah to the alul. And that's what he now says. Inside each oilam, not just one oilam from the other, but inside each oilam, in the spheres, hariheim nimshach mimadrega lama drega, they go from level to level. The mishtau shalim zemi, the spheres inside the oilam are also mishtal shalim. They go down this series of linked derivations, one to the idea, and this is what the Alter Rebbe brings down in that famous Se'ir V'chayocha that we quoted before in the chapter 20, that he brings that the spheres in Olam Atzilus Atzma are mishtal shalim zeh mizeh b'derech ilava olo. And that's what the Rebbe repeats it over here, that they go from level to level. Omamela muchrach sheyeh behem b'chinas mailo umato, more in the higher, more gilui in the higher, and less gilui in the one that derives out from him. And a inyan from kadima ve'ichur, how do you call it, one being primordial in its state, like abide other. In other words, that this was killed previous in a way, and that's already the beginning of the concept of time. Mashenke in the Indian of Milo Matamamis, that's the beginning of the concept of place. This is more and this is less, but that's more the concept of place. Mashenke time is like the idea of precedence. So over there it's not mamish time, but we see that in that whole Indian it begins the beginning of a giving of a place to time. I said, over the Rebbe, you got the two in your name of Milo Matov, Kedima, Ve'ichur, Aleph through the whole idea of the Kav, not through the fact that they're all just received from the Ein Seif. They're received through the Kav, Alidei, the Tzimtzum, V'chuli. And he said in another way that in the Kav itself, their link one with the other is B'derech Ishtaushel Ilava Olo. Ve'hine, Im Loyo Im Ishtaushel Zeh Mizeh, Gam kein muchlach shir mailumat. So the Rebbe says, we have to be honest with ourselves, that even if there wasn't this Indian of Hishtaushulus, and it just went in a way not by way of Hishtaushulus, yet nonetheless he said it would also be muchlach that there be mailo umata of a kedima of a ichor mitad hamshachosam miyakav. He said, but nonetheless, he said that even if the individual levels weren't b'derech one from the other, the fact that they came through this kav would nonetheless oblige them, some one way or another, to be in a state of umayla umata. So he says, "Umikol mochim yesh loima." How can I have my cake and eat it too? How can I say that? We could suggest that Oz Hoya Milo Mata Vakadima Veichur Boilamas Atzman Ava Bechol Oilam Beaproti Sfira Shaboy Imiyoy Shahoyu Chalukim Beetem Mahusom, even though they would be different in their very mahus. In other words, that Chochma would be different than Bina, and Chesed would be different than Yehuda. Nonetheless, Lo Yehoyu Behem Pchinas Milo Umata, they themselves would not have Maila or Mata. Or Befrat Bechinas Kedima Veicha, and for sure there wouldn't be like a preference in time one over the other. In other words, what we could have, says the Rebbe, that there would be in the Klolos Ilamas, there would be this union of Milo Matter, because they'd be coming from the cow. But we could imagine that inside each oilam it wouldn't be a inyan for the shtalshelus zemi, zemi zeh. Inside the spheres atzman. In other words, we would have a form of shtalshelus in the oilamas, but not in the inyan of the spheres shebetoicham, or the madrega shebetoicham. In other words, we can imagine a oilam where all the madregas would be equal. They would have in the sense that the amount of oil shebehem would be equal, but they would be different, each one, from the idea. So ask yourself, where did that difference come from? Why would they be different? If they're not mishtalsha one from the other, why would they be different? So we have to say that would come einocharami mitzad the cow. The fact that they would be different, that would come mitzad the cow. But the fact that they're not being mishtalshel one from the other, well, that would cause them to be different in their very mahus. That the cow would cause a certain interdivision in the type of mahus that there is, but it wouldn't be an intimate connection one with the other, but they're mishtalshelas. So you might say, well, wait a minute, what sort of how can I picture this in my mind? So we're now going to meet up with the concept of the Rebbe said this does occur in one world. And that's the famous world of Elam HaToihu, the so-called world of chaos, where there was an interconnection, and what's called the union of Shkalalas. That's because in that world, it only derived from the previous world, somewhat B'derech Ishtalsalas. But once it got into a world, the Eibishter made all the madregas in that world, as it were, with a similar amount of oil. And therefore each one of them said, I got this as much oil as what you have. Who said you're the leading sphere, and maybe I am. Because I also got a tremendous amount of light. And therefore they weren't able to. There was no beetle or iskalas between them. Only a very minimal iskalas. The truth is there was a certain amount of iskalas, but only a very minimal amount. And what happened that they literally caused a certain breakage amongst themselves, and that's what led to this whole collapse of what we call the Shviras HaKeilim. So the Rebbe said that is an example of this Gilui Apetich Olam Echad, where you wouldn't have mitzad Ishtaushel Ziliva'ol, the spheres, you would just have them coming out of the cup, boom, 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 each one Kamosha Shahu being Yonai, but the amount of oil would be equal in all of them. It wouldn't be B'derech Ishtaushel, or the same toik, if we could say, the same power of the oil in each and every one of them. What would happen is that everyone would say, Anor Emloich. Everyone that says, I am the king, right? I am the Balabot. And so the other says, wait a minute, you're the king, who are you? I am the king. So he says to him, wait a minute, how come do you come to that conclusion? I'm the king around here. He said, well, I got the same type of oil what you got. So they couldn't get together. So what happened was that there was a sort of an afila because of that. But we see from that there is a possibility that there can be a oil where the spheres don't go bishtalshels one from the idea, even though that's already in the seder of the oilamas, which means that the oilamas did. But when we got to this oilam, all of a sudden the whole way of ishtalshel was paused, and it didn't go ahead in the usual way. So we can imagine all of them could have been that way. It would have been possible to imagine such a thing, and in effect there was one oilam. But we see that wasn't Hashem's purpose. That's not what he wanted, because he didn't really want the union of the Nefila. I mean, he wanted it, the Shviras HaKeilim, he wanted it because he wanted it to happen. That's part of his purpose. Yeah, but he didn't want it to happen in the sense that he doesn't want that type of thing. So he only let it happen in order to get to making things very tricky for us. And that we should stand in all the neshenis and all the inyonim of this world and so on and so forth. And that's why he made this oilam that had this big collapse, which is called Torah. And to a certain extent we are well, I don't know, maybe we're not, because the Rebbe said that the normal birurim have been completed. is maybe is very, very delicate and trying Biruim of moving in that place. But the ordinary Biruim have been completed. And therefore, to a certain extent, we have reached a point where we can say, look, Eivester Olam Ha'Torah's Bira has been completed. But for whatever amount of time, the Eivester wanted that the world should battle and struggle with this situation that came about, and it's the fact that all the spheres couldn't unite, and remember they caused a certain Yerida in themselves. So there can be such a inyan. That's not what the Eivester wanted, but the Yacholiot Davak is there. There was a derivative. That's what could have happened, but that's not the way it is. Because what happened is that the Eivester made that all the Oilams, except for that one, they go b'shtaushulers, and even the spheres, and the details in each Olam, everything goes b'shtaushulers, one from the other. Therefore, there's an intimate connection and feeling on the part of one that it's dependent in the other, and it's lower compared to the other. And therefore, each sphere feels that the one beyond it and higher than it's got a miler, and it has to be bottled to that. It's just as a higher understanding in these scholars that the one above also said, well, there's a miler in the simple one. I've also got to be makabel from that. But in what you might call the normal Seder is that the higher gives to the lower. In a higher form of that understanding, the higher also knows that he's got to receive a certain hashpah also from the lower. As is well known, is a male for us of that's what we got. Hine kol olam yesh madida eki even hagiloi derin seif olam ha'u. In that particular world, the Eivester decided how much giloi ain't. Olafia even hamadida b'isa olam. Haya hagiloi b'ifun kazeh b'klolos olam. Ha'u b'chol ha'pratim sheboy. So he said, what would have happened had it been done this way, not with the hishtaushulers, then you would have had a gilui in that olam, but it would have been an equal gilui in all the details. What would have happened? Something like two. And he said, they have no interrelation one with the other, and they stand underneath, separately, one from the other, not cloven or interwoven, but separately, one from the other. They don't have any real ishtaushus or kesher, one with the other. That they differ very essentially. The midas ein begins is pilot, you put there on there. Kol mochim harei ba'gilui shabahen ein shavim. In the gilui that there is in them, they're all equal. And therefore comes again the moichin. He says, listen here, I'm the balabasa, I'm the moichin, I have what to say around here. So the midas say, oh yeah, I've also got I've got a big oil in me just like you have. Who said you are the decider of what is the might call the policy? So therefore they all said the same thing, and therefore there was like a sort of a very spiritual collision between them, and that lack of unity led to a certain nefila on their part.
So they have the same amount of oil in each sphere?
Yeah. Kilo, when we say amount, we mean in the intensity of the kilo, and they're not dependent one on the other for that kilo. Well, they don't depend one on the other. Therefore, each one says, I've got to, I'm equal in my revelation of light to what you are. Your in is kacha, my in is kacha, over the far. What is? So therefore, they sort of they're not makablim one from the other. Mashinkim, when it goes b'shtaushulers, then you can't say that. Each one realizes that without the higher one, he doesn't really have his nurturement, b'klal. Therefore, he's naturally bottled to it.
Because of the shtalshulus or because of the kav?
Well, no, that's the union. No, what we're saying is that we could have the kav even without always having any finished ulcers. But when we do have the calf, then we do have his ulcers, because from one world to the other, there would be a certain decision on the part of the calf, what is that elam going to be makabel. But maybe that could also be without his ulcers. That could be without his ulcers. Once I bring in the contra to his ulcers, then I must have that all of them are dependent and to a certain extent pertaining one to the other. You follow? Good. Okay, so we'll hold that for this evening.